As a young woman, I have big dreams and aspire to one day represent my country on the world stage. However, I am often told that this is unrealistic, that I will never become a leader of this country because of my gender or skin colour, and if I did, I would inevitably bear the brunt of much hate and pain. As our first female Prime Minister, what advice do you have for young women of colour who, like me, have big aspirations for the future but are constantly discouraged for these reasons?
My advice would be, if you've got a passion for leadership, a passion for politics, to absolutely go for it. No dream is too big. You know, I came from an ordinary family. If anybody had suggested to me or my mother or father when I was your age that I'd end up as Prime Minister, it would have resulted in lots of laughter. I mean, you know, people from families like ours didn't go into politics and end up at the top. So, you know, my life story is an indication that it's possible. Yes, I'm not going to insult your intelligence, though, and say that there would be no gendered bit or no racism. You would encounter those things. I wish I could tell you, no, it would all be fine, but that wouldn't be honest. And in terms of getting ready for those things, I think it's just important to think about them in advance. I mean, I'm not someone who's got personal expertise of dealing with racism, so I can't give you an insight into that, but I think I can give you an insight into the reactions you get being a woman. And one of the reasons I wanted to write a book was to say to young women, go for it, but don't be naive. You will get gendered reactions. Think about how you're going to handle them in advance. Forewarned is forearmed, and I wish I'd had a book like this when I was starting out in politics. And so I do think you have to nurture particularly a sort of sense of self that isn't hostage to what other people say about you. I speak to a lot of young people in politics, particularly young women, who end up looking at their social media feed and crying over some of the things that are said. And you do have to find a way of kind of distancing who you really are from these casual and cruel critiques by others. So lesson number one is don't spend night times over the social media. If you're in a professional campaign, you get someone else to do that for you. You don't do it yourself. But you do have to build some, you know, some barriers, some shielding inside you. And the earlier you can think about that, who you would reach out to for support, how you would deal with sexism, whether you'd call it out, whether you'd try and get someone else to call it out, the better your defensive strategies, then when the moment comes, the readier you'll be to go.
I'm interested to know how you respond if and when you are told that.
I'm quite a stubborn personality, so I always put it aside. But I think it's more the subtleties as well. It's, you know, by example also, you know, looking in Parliament and seeing discrimination not only based on gender but also race, like within the Parliament. And I think that in itself is quite kind of hurtful, but also like it's discouraging. And I know a lot of my friends who are also people of colour, who are also women, are discouraged from doing those kinds of things, even though I think they have the most brilliant mind. So I think it's like, how do we change those subtleties that exist within our country that actually prevent women and people of colour from going into those positions? And
did the experience that Julia Gillard went through as Prime Minister encourage you to pursue politics or discourage you?
It kind of had a two-way response. It definitely did encourage me in terms of understanding that the Australian population would accept a woman as their leader and potentially if we could move forward with that. But also, I think the discrimination that you did face was a bit of a hindrance. But I think the misogyny speech kind of combated that all. So that was very encouraging.
Stubborn is a really good character trait. I am a very stubborn person. We should have a club, Stubborn People of the World Unite or something. So stubborn is a good character trait. And the more women who go into it, the more women of colour who go into it, then the easier it ultimately becomes. In the book on women and leadership, we interviewed women leaders, and I'm saying we because I co-authored it with an African friend of mine, a woman called Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. But one of the women we interviewed was Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, who was crystal clear that it's a different thing to lead your nation as Prime Minister when you're the third one. You know, Jenny Shipley, Helen Clark, then Jacinda Ardern, that's a different experience. So hopefully by the time you're ready to go, it won't be Julia Gillard and a whole lot of men. It will be some women in between, and the nation will be more used to it, and the gendered reactions will be less, and that will make it not easy, but a different experience than the experiences that others have had.
So Tara, I think you're in year 12 at the moment. So how old were you when the misogyny speech happened?
Ooh.
Early high school.
Yes,
would have
definitely.
Been.
It was around early high school. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things is that it's still got currency. This was the misogyny speech on TikTok.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. The Leader of the Opposition says that people who hold sexist views and who are misogynists are not appropriate for high office. Well, I hope the Leader of the Opposition has got a piece of paper and he is writing out his resignation. Because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives, he needs a mirror. I'm a bitch, I'm a boss, I'm a bitch and a boss.
So are you on TikTok?
To tell you the truth, when that all started, I was getting messages from friends about TikTok. I didn't even know what TikTok was. I'm staring at these messages and trying to work out what they're talking about. So that got me, I'm not on TikTok, but at least that got me looking at TikTok, and I know that it became quite a thing, the misogyny speech.
That was made by a young woman called Abby. Are you
Yes.
surprised at the fact that it still has some kind of resonance even now?
Oh, astonished. If anybody had told me back when I gave the speech that we'd still be talking about it all these years later, I would have thought that was fanciful beyond belief. I would have been surprised if anybody was talking about it 24 hours later. I thought it would be that day.
Come on, you would have known that it would light things up, wouldn't you?
Oh no, I knew it landed with force in the Parliament. You know, I have spent enough time in Parliament to know when something's landed hard in the parliamentary floor, and you're quite close to the opposition in Parliament, and I saw them sort of drop their heads, so I knew it was a powerful speech, but I didn't expect it to go beyond the chamber, that night's news, maybe the next morning's newspapers. I mean, so little did I expect it to go further. I remember when I sat down, I turned round to Wayne Swan, my Deputy Prime Minister who sat behind me, and said somewhat resentfully, "Oh, now I'll have to listen to one of theirs speak and I haven't got anything to do. I'm going to get some correspondence run in, so I've got something to do." And Wayne, with this really odd look on his face, was, "You can't give the kind of I accuse speech and then start signing letters. Like, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, that's really weird." And then Anthony Albanese came up to me and said, "Oh, I felt really sorry for Abbott when he looked at his watch." And I went, "That's really weird." So it was starting to get a little bit unusual before I left the Parliament, but even with that, I didn't think here we'd be all these years later.
Do you miss that theatre, the sort of landing the blow, as you describe it?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, I do. You know, there's kind of a division in feminist thinking about whether you know, as feminists, we should be looking at power structures and trying to break them down and making them more collective, more caring and sharing. And I respect that theme of feminism, but that hasn't been my personal theme. You know, what I came to the Parliament to do was to show that a woman could stand in that adversarial place and own it. And some days, not every day, but some days I managed to do that. And you know, I would get ready for question time, I'd walk my way into the parliamentary chamber, I'd literally feel the second my adrenaline would kick, I would feel the physical response, and I'd be ready to go. And you do have that sort of performer's instinct. So, yes, I do miss that, but for every moment like that, there's, you know, hours and hours and hours of relentless work, of media intrusion into your life, a whole lot of other things that come with parliamentary life. I don't miss those. I've joked that I've never got up any morning since and gone, gee, I miss the Canberra Press Gallery, not once.